What's up, my beautiful friends? In today's video, I want to talk to you about that one weapon that I've used very successfully in the past to land formal interviews with the likes of Goldman Sachs, ESPN, and many such corporate behemoths, as well as with startups. And no, I'm not talking about my good looks. I'm talking about something known as informational interviews. Even if you already know what informational interviews are, I can assure you that you aren't aware of the full potential of informational interviews and how you can actually leverage them to quite literally land a formal interview with any employer of your choice. And how can I say that so confidently? Well, in my fairly young corporate career so far, I've worked front office roles with the likes of Cisco, PwC, Deutsche Bank, Goldman Sachs, ESPN, and across a whole host of industries: engineering, consulting, sales and trading, investment banking, as well as sports media. Trust me, I'm a dumbass, so it's not my intelligence that got me these coveted roles. It's how I very smartly went about leveraging informational interviews. This video is divided into 4 parts. So the first part talks about what informational interviews are and why they're an absolute necessity in your bid to land your desired role, especially when the odds are heavily stacked against you. Maybe you're applying for a role that's ultra competitive in nature, and or you don't go to a target school, and or you don't have the best of grades in college, and or your academic background isn't quite in line with the role that you're gunning for, and or you're looking to make a drastic pivot from one type of role to a completely different type of role. Fucking hell, I'm out of breath. The second section of the video covers how to schedule these informational interviews. The third section covers with whom to schedule them, and the fourth and final section covers how you should approach these informational interviews such that you can actually maximize your chances of converting these informational interviews into formal interviews. Now that I've very beautifully laid the groundwork for this discussion, let's get underway with part 1, shall we? Sorry. We can't get underway just yet because you haven't liked this video and subscribed to my channel. Done? Welcome to the Legends Club. The Berkeley Career Center website defines an informational interview as an informal conversation you can have with someone working in an area of interest to you. It is an effective research tool and is best done after preliminary online research. It is not a job interview, and the objective is not to find job openings. Let me tell you that the Berkeley Career Center knows absolutely fuck all, because while the primary purpose of informational interviews might be to extract as much information as possible from the interviewee about your area of interest, they can be strategically used to find job openings as well. And I say that because in all likelihood, the person that you're speaking with is consciously or subconsciously judging your potential and assessing whether he or she should add you to the official candidate pool or not. And so through these casual conversations or informational interviews, you can actually make a very compelling case for them to look at you as a serious candidate, thereby adding you to the official candidate pool. In fact, I look at informational interviews as one of the least crowded routes to securing a place in the candidate pool. The only route that's perhaps less crowded than this one is my dad's the fucking CEO of the company route. But I'm guessing that doesn't apply to you. Otherwise, you'd be doing better things than watching this video of mine. The most crowded route is the online application portal. Submitting your application online can give you a nice fucking dopamine hit when you see that application successfully submitted message, but that dopamine hit is all you'll get. And that's because the online application portal receives hundreds of thousands of applications. Do you actually think HR is going to take time out to sift through every single application coming in? No fucking chance. So that's why you should look at the online application portal like a black hole. Once something goes in, it's lost forever. Besides, there are thousands of applicants that you're competing against whose academic as well as extracurricular credentials are as impressive, if not more impressive than yours. But through these informational interviews, you can actually make a much stronger case for yourself, which will also help you bypass all of your competition. And so you have to go above and beyond for your application to even be considered, especially when you're applying to a top-notch place, which I know you are, because I know all of you are ambitious fucks. So that's part 1 of the video done and dusted. On to part 2 now, which is how to schedule these informational interviews. Let's say you're looking to break into Company X. Now, you send out email requests to professionals at Company X currently working in the group or division of the company that you're looking to break into, requesting them for a few minutes of their time. The following email template is what got me the most number of responses. We'll quickly go over the template, after which let's examine the characteristics of this template that contribute to its success in terms of eliciting responses from the people that you actually send this email out to. It goes, "Hi Jason, my name is Anubhav Jain and I'm a 4th year industrial engineer at Georgia Tech, in parentheses, 3.86 GPA, banking and capital markets intern at PwC in New York, credit structuring intern at Deutsche Bank. I'm very interested in the opportunity to interview for an investment banking analyst role at Goldman Sachs. Would you be willing to speak with me briefly sometime in the near future to provide some guidance and talk about your experiences at the firm? Thank you very much for your time and consideration. Best, Anubhav, resume attached for reference. So this was the template that I'd used when reaching out to bankers in my bid to break into investment banking. Now you might be looking for a completely different type of role. So make sure that you end up making appropriate modifications to the content of this email template, but I'd suggest keeping a similar structure. And what I mean by that is that make sure that your email is crisp, punchy, and of minimum necessary length. In other words, ensure that the email that you send out only includes those points that are relevant to the role that you're gunning for and points that actually bolster your profile considerably. So this includes your top academic highlights, for example, your GPA, any relevant work experience that you have, and any impressive and relevant extracurricular highlights. For example, if you're looking for a finance role, then president of the finance society of your college would be a very impressive and a very relevant addition to the body of your email. You could be the president of the fucking Mickey Mouse Society on campus, but you wouldn't want to mention that since it's not relevant in any way, shape, or form. So only include what's of primary importance and relevance. Whatever secondary can be mentioned if and when you end up speaking over the phone with the person that you're sending this email out to. And I say that because most corporate professionals are pressed for time. And so if they end up receiving a long ass email from someone they aren't obligated to help, rarely will they actually take the time to look through the email and respond to you. So remember, less is more. How I wish the less is more philosophy applied to money as well. If your GPA isn't all that impressive, then please do not include it in the body of your email. Remember, I said academic highlights and not lowlights. Do not explicitly mention in the body of your email that please find attached my resume. Just add a very simple resume attached for reference below your regards Anubhav or best Anubhav signature. And I say this because the former makes it seem as if you expect them to look through your resume. The latter, on the other hand, makes it seem as if they're under no obligation to do so, but if they would like to, they can. The former makes it seem like more work for them. And although you're less demanding in the latter, if they do open up your email and read through it, they will inevitably click on the attachment as well. So the latter increases the likelihood that the recipient will click on the attachment while being less demanding of him or her. So win-win. And it's completely fine to very explicitly mention in the body of your email that you're interested in interviewing for an internship/full-time role. Look, all corporate professionals completely understand that the purpose behind these informational interviews isn't just to educate yourself on the nature of the role, but to also be added to the company's candidate pool. So don't beat around the fucking bush. Show intent, as Virat Kohli would say. You'll notice that in the third paragraph of the template, I've used the word guidance. And that's because whenever you ask someone for guidance or advice, it makes them feel important. It strokes the ego a bit. It softens their stance, which will make them a lot more receptive to replying to you. So that's a lesson on human psychology that you can actually use to your advantage. So those were some of the characteristics of a good outreach email or a good cold email. You can also send out such emails to HR, but there's a slight modification that I would suggest making. The difference lies in the fact that you write to non-HR people wanting to learn about their respective experiences at the firm and requesting guidance, whereas you write to HR to simply talk about potential internship/full-time opportunities at the firm. So it's just the third paragraph of the email template that changes. Instead of writing, would you be willing to speak with me briefly sometime in the near future to provide some guidance and talk about your experiences at the firm? You'll write, would you be willing to speak with me briefly sometime in the near future about potential opportunities at the firm? Otherwise, everything else can remain the same. So these were some of the do's and don'ts to abide by when sending out emails to professionals in your area of interest, requesting them for a few minutes of their time for informational interviews. Now, what's as important, if not more important than how to compose an email, is whom to send these emails out to. If your college is considered to be a target school by the company that you're looking to break into, then you may already have a list of contacts to reach out to in the form of college alumni working at that company, HR as well as non-HR professionals you may have previously met at info sessions, networking sessions, coffee chats, etc. On the other hand, if the company that you're looking to break into does not come to your campus, i.e. your college is a non-target school, then the number of contacts you'll be possessing will be few and far between. But regardless of whether you go to a target school or a non-target school, the approach and the strategy that I'll be talking about will help you maximize the responses you receive to your emails while minimizing the time spent sending out those emails. A lot of people claim that the outreach process is a numbers game. I agree, but there are ways in which you can optimize this numbers game. So begin by reaching out to people you already know and have met in the past who are currently working in your area of interest. For example, if investment banking is your area of interest, then the lowest hanging fruit for you is reaching out to people whom you know who are currently working as investment bankers. Once you've exhausted that list, browse through LinkedIn to find people who are currently working in your area of interest, whom you don't know personally, but with whom you have some sort of connection or something in common. This could be something as simple as the fact that that he or she went to the same college as you, hails from the same hometown, had the same major in college, has similar interests, someone you have mutual friends with, or anything really that makes you seem like less of a stranger in his or her eyes. Whenever you do find such a person through your research, it's very easy for you to ascertain the email address of that person using just 3 pieces of information: the first name of the person, the last name of the person, and the email format of the company to which that person belongs. The email format of the company can be found through a very quick Google search. So if you just type Goldman Sachs email format, Google will tell you that Goldman Sachs has an email format which is first name dot last name at gs.com or first name dot last name at goldmansachs.com. So say you're reaching out to someone who works at Goldman Sachs whose first name is Anubhav and last name is Legend, then the email address of that person would be anubhav.legend at gs.com or anubhav.legend at goldmansachs.com. In the event that the employer or the company follows 2 or 3 different email formats, then you shoot out emails one by one to all possible email addresses of that person that you've derived until one of your emails doesn't bounce back. In the outreach email that you send out to this person, you could also explicitly mention what you have in common. I actually have a very interesting story to share with you guys that shows how a very unexpected and uncommon common factor is what helped me secure a formal interview with UBS. So I was browsing through LinkedIn one night and I chanced upon the profile of a UBS investment banker of Indian origin who had Manchester United listed under interests on his LinkedIn profile. And I think by now all of you already know that I've been a massive Manchester United fan ever since I was in my diapers. And so I decided to write to this person mentioning in the email our mutual interest in football/Manchester United. We ended up speaking over the phone the following day, and a majority of our conversation was about football and Manchester United. At the end of the phone call, he told me that he felt that I had a very good personality and that he would connect me with other bankers in the same group. So that one conversation that I had with that banker led to many more such informational interviews with bankers within the same group, which ultimately led to UBS sending me a formal interview invitation. Fortunately for me, I did not end up getting an offer from UBS because who knows, had that been the case, I may have started out at a fucking UBS instead of a Goldman Sachs. So it worked out pretty well for me. Didn't work out too well for UBS though, because they didn't get to be a beneficiary of my talent. There's a reason they're a fucking UBS. Next on your list are graduating seniors from your college whom you know, who've already secured full-time jobs for themselves in your area of interest, who can pass along their respective lists of contacts to you. Some of them might even allow you to use their reference when reaching out to some of the contacts on their list. So this is where the relationships that you build in college can come in handy. And lastly, when browsing around on LinkedIn, you'll come across the names of lots of professionals with whom you have nothing in common, people you don't know personally, but people who currently work in the group or division or company that you're looking to break into. These are the people to whom you're a complete stranger, but you should reach out to these people as well by ascertaining their email address using the technique that I talked about a few minutes back. But as I said, leave them for the very last. So these were some of the different sources that you can use to build a list of contacts and how you can very smartly and strategically go about reaching out to that list. Now, the following pointers apply to all of the sources that I talked about. Point number 1, do not reach out to juniors. So don't reach out to analysts, people who've only spent 1 or 2 years at the company. They think they're important, but they're all fucking chutias because they have absolutely no say in the decision-making process. It's only the people who've spent a considerable amount of time at the company, so people who've spent at least 2 years, if not more, who have any say in the decision-making process. Having said that, you could schedule a few calls with these chutia analysts and use these calls as confidence builders before reaching out to the senior professionals. I'd done something very similar as well when I was trying to break into investment banking. So I'd scheduled a few informational interviews with analysts such that, I could gain some experience and practice under my belt. But as soon as I felt confident enough, I was sending a majority of my emails out to senior associates and VPs. And by actually doing that, you might help those poor analysts feel somewhat important about themselves because those poor souls are usually just used to being treated like the scummiest of the scum. Point number 2 is that just like you could use calls that you have scheduled with juniors as confidence builders before reaching out to the senior folks, use the calls that you have scheduled with professionals who are working at the companies that are not your top choice companies before moving on to the calls with professionals working at the companies of your choice. I'll give you a cricketing analogy. So say for instance, you're making your test debut and hypothetically speaking, you're given 2 options. So option 1 is that you could make your debut against a Sri Lanka or a Bangladesh or a West Indies. And option 2 is that you could make your debut against an Australia or an England or a South Africa. Now you could say that it might be more prudent to actually pick one of the lesser cricketing nations because higher chances of you doing well, which in turn will translate into higher confidence when facing stiffer challenges from some of the cricketing heavyweights that I talked about. Point number 3, focus more on reaching out to non-HR people than on reaching out to HR people. I personally did not find too many of my calls with HR people all that useful. HR simply serves as the gatekeeper. Bypass the gatekeeper and go straight to the fucking decision maker. Whenever I used to have those calls with HR people, I would invariably receive the same cliched response saying that I should apply on the company website. You'd honestly be better off seeking guidance from an astrologer or a palm reader or a tarot card reader than from HR. Most of them are also incompetent as fuck. The fact that they're really attractive somewhat makes up for the incompetence, with due respect to them. Point number 4, if there's a particular group at a company that you're targeting, please do not send out emails to every single employee belonging to that group all at the same time. Although unlikely, there might be talk on the floor about you, after which you'll just be perceived as a very desperate, annoying and clingy person, which is going to end your chances even before they've begun. In a nutshell, please do not ask the entire group out to coffee at the same time. Point number 5 is a very underrated point that I ought to mention, which is that throughout the outreach process, please be as organized as possible by maintaining an Excel sheet which actually tracks all the conversations that you've had so far, the conversations that are coming up, people that you're supposed to send out follow-up emails to because they haven't responded to your initial emails, etc., etc. In addition to having the obvious columns such as name, company, division, group, I also had a column labeled notes in which I would jot down any information pertaining to a contact that I thought would be useful to note down for future reference. So those are some of the ways in which you can actually optimize the outreach process and make it feel like less of a numbers game or a guessing game. Moving on to the responses or the lack thereof to the emails that you've sent out. Now, even if all your emails are very crisply worded and you've ticked all the right boxes, you will not hear back immediately from a number of people, perhaps even a majority of the people that you've actually reached out to. But just like you don't lose hope when your crush doesn't respond to you for a few days, you shouldn't lose hope here as well. Instead of panicking and jerking off, here's what you should do. Point number 1, please maintain patience. Give it at least half a week to a week before following up. And your follow-up email could be something as simple as, "Hi Jason, I hope your week is trending well so far. I was wondering if you've had a chance to take a look at the email that I'd sent you last week. Understand that you're busy, but would love to speak whenever most convenient for you. Thanks so much again. Best, Anubhav." There were so many instances when I would receive a response from a banker only after having sent them a follow-up email. But it's not just bankers. Most corporate professionals who are working at elite corporations are usually swamped with work. And even if they would have liked to have responded to your first email, the need of the hour may not have allowed them to do so. I can say this based upon personal experience. After breaking into Goldman's investment banking division, I would receive a ton of emails from investment banking aspirants requesting guidance pertaining to breaking into Goldman's investment banking division. And while I was able to respond to a few of the emails immediately, more often than not, I would simply ignore them thinking that I'm going to respond later. However, due to the sheer volume of work that comes your way in investment banking, those emails would end up getting buried somewhere in my inbox and I would forget to go back to them even though I had the best intentions in the first place. Thus, sending a very brief and polite follow-up email a few days after your initial email can actually serve as a friendly reminder to these corporate professionals to respond to you. Point number 2, please do not take offense when you don't hear back as often as you would like to. There could be lots of different factors at play. Maybe the person that you're reaching out to is genuinely busy. Maybe the group or the division that you're trying to break into isn't hiring at that time. Do not jump to the conclusion that a lack of responses to your emails is because you lack what it takes. Unless you actually think that you lack what it takes, in which case you should be working relentlessly to bridge the gap. You should simply focus on controlling the controllables, i.e. doing whatever's within your control to the best of your ability and not losing sleep over everything that's happening behind the scenes that's outside of your control. See, I'm so fucking zen. Lastly, it might be prudent to not put all your eggs in the same basket. If you have more than one area of interest, then make sure that you're putting out feelers to professionals working in those other areas of interest of yours as well. That's what they mean when they say casting your net wide. But don't overdo it. You've got to find a very healthy balance between hedging yourself by not putting all your eggs in the same basket and not spreading yourself too thin when casting a wide net. In a nutshell, you've got to continuously assess the results of your efforts in all directions and then fine-tune your strategy and approach based upon what's working and what's not. Casting your net wide also means applying to some of the smaller shops instead of only applying to the corporate giants. And who knows, some of these smaller shops might actually end up being more lucrative and more rewarding places to work at full time than some of these corporate juggernauts. Moving on to the fourth and final section, which concerns how you should approach these informational interviews. If and when you do hear back from some of the professionals you reached out to and they are willing to speak with you, reply to them thanking them for being willing to carve time out and then propose a few time slots for your chat. If the professional proposes a particular day/time, then try and make it unless it clashes with a pre-existing commitment that's completely unavoidable. I still remember there were so many instances when I either had to step out of class in the middle of a lecture or skip class altogether to speak with a banker or some other corporate professional. Prior to the call, make sure that you actually end up doing thorough research on the professional that you're speaking with by looking up his or her educational and professional experiences, interests, etc. on LinkedIn. I do something similar before dates as well, and it works out pretty well for me. During the informational interview, kick things off by giving a brief background about yourself. So this is your chance to relate your tell me about yourself story, which is by far the most important part of an informational interview. Either as part of your tell me about yourself story or at the end of it, briefly talk about your interest in the role and where that interest stems from. But please sound as organic as possible. Remember, this is not a formal interview. It's a casual conversation. So please chat with the other person as if the two of you are getting coffee together. That's what the vibe should be like. Once you're done relating your story, it's highly likely that the professional that you're speaking with will comment on your story or have some follow-up questions about it. Now, when you're first starting out, during your first few informational interviews, you might feel a bit nervous answering some of these follow-up questions. But as you gain more and more experience under your belt, as you gain more and more confidence, as you go through more and more informational interviews, you will feel a lot more confident to answer these questions smoothly by virtue of simply having encountered the same questions over and over and over again. Once your story has been discussed in quite some detail, the professional that you're speaking with will most likely give a brief background about himself or herself. If he or she doesn't do so voluntarily, then make sure that you ask the professional about his or her background and their experiences at the firm. Show that you're curious, even if that curiosity might be completely fake. And what's really going to help in making that fake curiosity come across as a lot more genuine is that instead of actually phrasing a question in a very generic manner, try making it a lot more specific based upon whatever you were able to glean on that professional from that professional's LinkedIn profile. So this is where the research that you actually do on the professional comes in handy. Point number 4, generally speaking, you're not tested with any technical questions during informational interviews, but please do not be taken aback or completely caught off guard in the event that the professional actually throws a technical question or two your way, especially if you've made the bold claim that you're very thorough with your technical stuff. I'll give you an example from the investment banking field. The same might not apply to other fields, so please use discretion. During informational interviews, I would often claim that despite being an engineer, I had taught myself the fundamental concepts of finance and accounting, and this would often prompt bankers to ask me a couple of basic technical questions just to test the validity of my claim. So while I knew that making that claim would generally result in a few technical questions coming my way, I was actually willing to take that calculated risk only because I was very confident about my technical stuff. Answering those questions correctly would show that I was someone who meant business. That is, I just didn't talk the talk, but I also walked the bloody walk. During the course of the conversation, the professional might ask you if there are any other companies that you're currently having conversations with. And the professional is going to ask you that question to gauge how hot a property you are and how seriously other companies are taking you. So be honest in telling the professional where you stand in terms of your outreach to professionals at other companies and if you have any formal interviews or offers lined up already. But do make it abundantly clear that the company to which the professional that you're currently speaking with belongs is one of the most desirable, if not the most desirable options for you, and why. Point number 6 of this section is that towards the fag end of the interview, the professional will ask you if you have any more questions for them. So do have 2 to 3 good questions in mind to ask them. You could ask them anything about themselves, anything about the company, anything about the culture in their group. You could also ask them macro questions about the industry in general. Point number 7 and the penultimate point is that you should always finish your informational interview with the next step. Now, if your conversation went really well, then the professional will generally be very receptive to your request to pass along your CV to others within the group and will even connect you to those others. The more people within a group who are impressed by your potential, the higher your chances of being added to the official candidate pool, thereby receiving a formal interview invitation. At the very end of the informational interview, I would often ask the professional if they think there's anything else that I should be doing in order to maximize my chances of breaking in. I would end up receiving a lot of heartening responses along the lines of, no, I don't think so. You seem to be doing all the right things. You've got a very compelling story. You know your technical stuff pretty well. It definitely won't be easy, but keep at it and something should open up for you. That's it, my homies. I know this was a long and dense video, so I would seriously suggest watching it or saving it such that you can easily refer to it in the future as well. If you're still watching this video, I know that you belong to the Legends Club, which means that you've already liked this video, subscribe to my channel, and hit the bell icon as well. So I'm going to ask you to do something different. On a scale of 1 to 10, tell me how sexy my beard looks. Of course, more importance will be given to responses from the ladies than to responses from the men, but everyone's opinion is welcome. But the condition is that you have to be as radically honest as possible. And so if you dislike it, please feel free to roast me as well as my beard. Thanks again. I hope you enjoyed my company as much as I enjoyed yours. Until next time, take care, stay safe, keep smashing it, and cheers.